right, hello friends. Tim Timmerman here, or Professor Tim, coming at you from the art department to talk to you about visual art and specifically how painting and art making can connect to the Beatitudes. And specifically right now we're talking about peacemaking, and specifically Matthew 5:5, the blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Or I thought it'd be curious to read to you the Message version of it, because it kind of pulls it out a little more. You are blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. So I'd like us to explore that in terms of those who are blessed that are teaching people to cooperate. When we were looking at assigning works of art specifically for this course, when I thought of peacemaking, there was one painting that came to mind and one artist that came to mind. And specifically, that's a 17th century, so the 1600s, a 17th century painter by the name of Peter Paul Rubens that you may be familiar with, that was painting in Flanders. So let's talk a little bit about Rubens here. Rubens helped bring the Baroque style outside of Italy. So Baroque is the main art era that's happening within the 17th century. Holland is a little different. Holland is doing it their own way in that it's a bunch of business people doing small works of art, selling it to local people. France, England, Flanders, Spain are all going to be either art for the church or art for those in leadership. So it's the big time people supporting the arts. So Rubens being in Flanders is very much working for the government, basically, and churches as well, in the works of art that he is creating. His father was a prominent Antwerp Protestant and fled Germany to escape Spanish persecution during the War of Independence. He would return when Peter Paul was about 10 and at the death of his father. So interesting enough, even though his father's Protestant, he grew up Catholic. And I think this explains a little bit of Peter Paul Rubens's mode of operating in terms of trying to work with people with different religious thoughts, like the Catholics and the Protestants together. Rubens would become a master at his work by about 1598 and would develop his own style when he traveled to Italy. So Rubens would be in Italy from about 1600 to 1608. He would study ancient sculpture, the High Renaissance, all kinds of stuff, and really just soak it in more than any northerner before. Durer did that a bit earlier in the Renaissance, but Rubens would really do that and then bring that to the fore back to the north and back to Flanders. Now let's talk a little bit about where things are, because if you asked me way back when where Flanders is, I'd be like, I have no idea. So I'm going to show you a little map. So Flanders in Rubens' day, actually, if you see, overlaps what we now know as Belgium, also into France and also into Holland. So it's a little bit across all those countries. Brussels was the center of Flanders, but specifically Rubens would be a little different and make his home in Antwerp, which if you notice is kind of right in the middle and right on the edge of our contemporary countries of Belgium and Holland. So it's kind of this area in between. So what's curious about him as well is well, there's all kinds of curious things. He would come back home because his mother was ill, but unfortunately, by the time he got home, his mother had passed. It wasn't the day of like instant messaging and stuff, right? So by the time he journeyed and got home, mom was passed away. But something good would happen. Within about a year and a half, he would get married to this lovely woman, Isabella Brandt. And I want to show you this painting because I think this is the best wedding portrait out there. If one of you can match this for like your wedding photo, man, tell me. I would love to see it. So this painting he was about 32. Isabella, I think, was like 18. And honeysuckle, the bush behind him, is a symbol of fidelity and marriage. And this kind of like, here we are coming together, getting married. All right, so his return back home, marrying beautiful Isabella, also coincided with a period of renewed prosperity in the area with the signing of the Treaty of Antwerp. And in April 1609, which initiated the 12-year truce, so at that time in 1609, so the same time this marriage portrait is painted, he's appointed court painter, and he specifically appointed court painter under the Archduke of Austria and also basically the sovereign of Spain, who at the time is a child, and also the sovereign of the Low Countries. So basically he's working for the aristocracy, the people that are in charge of the country, the king and queens that are in charge of Flanders and that area. So he would have the best of both worlds. He was an artist, but also he was an advisor. He was an emissary. So he would run a very large workshop in Antwerp and produce many paintings for nobility, for the government, for churches, and also work throughout Europe. He would be Rubens working throughout Europe. He was classically educated as a humanist scholar and a diplomat. And he was also knighted by Philip IV of Spain and Charles I of England. And he was a very prolific artist. The catalogs say that he produced 1,403 pieces in his lifetime. And those aren't copies of his work. Those are works that he actually had his hand in. He did have a whole team of people working and helping him. So know that other people were helping to paint those paintings as well. So in the name of that diplomacy, I want to talk a little bit about the Medici Cycle. So I want to take you to the Louvre. You've got to go to the Louvre. If you haven't been there, you got to go there. And the room I'm showing you right now is the gallery of the Medicis in the Richelieu wing of the Louvre. And in this, there's this gigantic series of these enormous paintings that he painted. And specifically, these were painted for Marie de Medici and painted after the at the end of the 12 Years Truce in 1621 as kind of part of a diplomatic mission while he was there. Apparently, while he was there too, he was also getting information and stuff from people he knew in France. But basically, he's in France painting these paintings as a diplomatic mission. And he was super active, traveling to Spain, England, the United Provinces, the Netherlands, and all over. And specifically here is where we come upon the piece I really want us to focus on. I want to focus on this piece, The Allegory of Peace by Peter Paul Rubens. So this picture was made for King Charles I of England and was given him to Rubens in 1630. Who at the time, he was the most famous artist of the time. So I want you to know, this is at the National Gallery in London, which is a phenomenal gallery. I want you to know, I'm wearing this green shirt for a purpose because I was traveling with George Fox students in England. We're at the National Gallery of London. I wore this shirt several years ago. Y'all, this is the shirt they wear if you work at the National Gallery of London. So what I did is I quickly got behind the desk and was like, hello, can I help you? And the staff were totally laughing. We had a great time. But what was really even funnier, honestly, because I had a headset because I was talking to students about art while we traveled through. So while we're traveling through, I'm talking on the headset, and people kind of like, hey, like the other people wearing the green shirts. I'm like, hello. Yes. So anyway, I had to wear this today because I knew I was talking to you about this painting. And see, like we're at the National Gallery of London, and I'm talking to you about this piece. So there, don't you feel like you're in England right now? You should. No matter where you're sitting, looking at this computer. Okay, anyway, so let's talk about this work of art. So this painting was made for the King of England as Rubens is an envoy for Philip IV of Spain, right? The two countries, Spain and England, had been at war for 5 years, and both sides were really keen for a peace deal. Charles, the King of England, was an enthusiastic art collector, and with this painting, Rubens was appealing not only to his connoisseurship, but also delivering a diplomatic message. Isn't that cool? Okay, so the message is an allegorical form. The figures in the painting personify different emotions, virtues, other abstract concepts, but also has a very clear moral message. And so to understand it further, this very complicated painting, let's unpack it piece by piece. So we're going to kind of zoom in to the central figures. So there's a woman who's breastfeeding a small child, right? That woman is Peace or Pax. So this is a traditional Greek Roman goddess, right, of peace. So here she is, the god of peace. She's content, she's at rest, and she's feeding this child. She also could be seen as Ceres, the god of earth. It could be both, right? And often in these paintings, the allegories can kind of overlap. So she's feeding Plutus, so where we get Pluto, the god of wealth. So clearly, peace brings wealth because peace is feeding this child. So also in the image is a satyr, which is an earthy image. He has a cornucopia of all this fruit, like all this fruitfulness is going to happen with peace. And also there's a puto, and yes, that's a name of a baby angel. If you didn't know, singular puto, plural puti, it's a real name. So there's a little puto helping things out. Also on the right are a whole little set of 3 innocent children, innocent young people, right? And they're the hopes of the future. They're the future generation because, you know what, if there's peace, there's hope. There's a future generation is supported and loved. And with them is another little boy, which is the god of marriage, or Hymen, they believe. So, and he's crowning one of the little girls because when you're in a prosperous place, there's going to be marriage, there's going to be peace, right? So those are our central figures. Let's move out into the bigger picture. On the very top, and when you look, there's going to be a link to this of the National Gallery in London, and you can look at these images closely. Look at the face of little Mercury at the top. It's a super goofy little face on this kid, but it's another Puto, or they believe Mercury, coming down. Mercury, because he's holding that staff with 2 snakes entwined, he's associated with ideals of fair exchange and reciprocation and negotiation. So the symbol of reciprocation, negotiation is coming in. Also, we have followers of Bacchus, so the god of wine, the god of abundance, the god of where that satyr would come from. Like, yeah, things are good, right? So they're in there. Also, hence the leopard. The leopard's in there because the leopard actually drives the chariot of Bacchus. Did you notice that leopard at first? I just got to ask you because he's kind of hiding in there. She's kind of hiding there. She's like, meow, meow. She's back on her back. Woo, life's good. I'm just playing. And also, these characters, specifically the one close to us, could represent prosperity because look at what she's carrying. Look at all those jewels. Look at all the goodness. There's like these jeweled cups, like, and pretty awesome. So the woman with tambourine and her prosperity, or followers of Bacchus. Then right behind Pax, or peace, is Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. And notice I love her in this piece because she is shoving this other dude out. She's like, I got this, because wisdom's going to be pushing it. Who? Mars, the god of war, going, get out of here. You have no place here, Mars, the god of war. And then in the back, screaming is like a harpy, or it could be Fury, the goddess of vengeance, is in the back like, ah! Like, you know, falling. You can quote me on that. Anyway, not right now. So much activity going on, right? The overall message is so clear in this image, and it chimes in with Rubens' mission. Rejecting war and embracing peace will bring prosperity and plenty. The mission also ultimately bore fruit because Rubens returned to Antwerp in March of 1630, having been knighted by Charles, and a peace treaty signed between England and Spain that November. So see, man, art works, man, right there. There's a couple other interesting things that happen in here. Those children at the bottom weren't just any children. They are the sons and daughters of Sir Balthazar Gerbier. Anyway, you can read it. So this is basically the man who works as the emissary for art and works directly with the king. And so he worked directly with King Charles. So these are all his kids. Specifically, George is Hymen, and Elizabeth is the girl closest to us, and then Susan is the little girl looking very intriguingly out at us. So he's using actual players, people that are involved at the time. Just super brilliant, super smart. So I'm going to geek out a bit here, because that's what I do, on the elements and principles of design and kind of what we can find in here. First of all, I'd like you to notice there's a series of connecting rings. There's the figures at the bottom. All, if we connect their heads to their bodies, there's a ring of them at the bottom, but also at the top, there's a ring of figures at the top. And the coolest part, you know what connects them, is the gaze between Pax and Plutus. So that gaze between wealth and peace is connecting both those rings. Pretty awesome, huh? Or another thing to talk about is how the structure is made in lines, because there's so much happening in this, but Rubens puts an understructure into the whole thing. Not only those rings, notice there's a series of lines that run from left to right through the image. If we go through the figures and kind of how their arms are shaped, connecting us and making a series of lines within the composition. But not just that, there's a series of lines going the other way as well. So you can see from the harpy's arm all the way down to the leopard. The leopard's arms are out, the harpy's arm is out. You see how there's a line that connects them right through the faces, because the faces are things of interest that help connect us to, right? All the way from the way Mars is leaning back to the leg of the woman, to the tip of the tail of the tiger, which is hiding behind the woman, which I think is pretty curious, to the back of the satyr up into Minerva's head, and then from Mercury at the top to our Prosperity's arm to the left there. So overall then we get this grid. Look at that, whoop, whoop, that's running over the whole piece. Isn't that pretty crazy? Or, ready, Tim's gonna continue to geek out on art because this is a fun thing to do, is check out how they're looking at one another. So we have Peace and Plutus looking at one another. Then there's these parallel lines of the characters right near them. So there's this kind of grounding of those figures looking at one another, right? There's this connective line of Mars looking at the kids below. So it completes that shape that's happening in there. All right, so besides the children connecting and the leopard is looking to, notice the leopard's looking at Plutus up there. We have two more parallel lines running. The harpy's looking back at Minerva because she's like, better get out of here, right? And then we have the woman that's Prosperity is looking back at Pax. And then we have this upper triangle that I think is really cool where Mercury's looking down at Pax. So we end up having these two triangles and these parallel lines that help connect things within the image. Isn't that pretty amazing? All right. So, and actually, last thing I want to say about this image is notice the little girl Susan is looking out at us. Notice how this is totally similar to what we saw in that painting in the Birds of Mercy of the beggar, or the basically mean dude and the beggar, right? Where we had the woman coming out looking at us. Same thing. Susan's looking at us. So it's a way that's connecting us into the image. Super smart, right? They're not always looking at us. She's looking at us like, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, I'm a child of the future. How are you going to take care of me and create a peaceful world? So pretty amazing. Last piece I just want to talk about a little bit of his is, so 7 years later, he would do this piece, The Horrors of War. Here we have a totally different scene. Venus in this one, who also can be seen as Peace, is vulnerable, naked, and basically trying to keep Mars from going to war, but he's going to war, and there's the Harpy, or Vengeance, going crazy to the right there, and there's all sorts of crazy composition things here, and people being trampled, but that's a story for another day. So to close, talking a little bit about Rubens, this is actually a self-portrait he painted just a year before he passed away. And while the form of this allegory of this painting may be somewhat obscure to modern viewers, the message is clear. Peace brings prosperity and wealth, the precious vessels, the pearls, bountiful harvest, the overflowing cornucopia, stable family life, the crowning of the young girl by the god Hymen and all the children, general happiness, the playful leopard, right? The girl with the tambourine. And this piece must be vigorously protected from the ever-present threat of war, which I think is really profound in this image. And as I said, it worked. So what I would like to close with you is a prayer. And I grew up Episcopalian, and I still very much participate in that community and also in the Quaker community, which I feel like this is the absolute perfect piece for the Quaker community and the Christian community, right? So what I thought, how do I end this? And I thought of this prayer that I remember being said at the end of a church service, and so I want to say it to you. Go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor everyone. Love and serve the Lord. Rejoicing in the powers of the Holy Spirit. And the blessing of the God Almighty, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, be among you and remain with you always. And that's 1 Thessalonians 5:13 through 22, in case you wondered. Anyway, blessings all, and the peace that you bring in the world around you.